Franck-Lin, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We thought it'd be a really great idea at Dreyfus Ashby to kind of pull some questions within the company, reach out to some partnering wholesalers to get some questions from them, as well as our trade, and just kind of tie you down for 30 minutes and learn more about you, the family, the history of Campuget, lay of the land, etc. So can you kind of just give us an update on what's happening at the vineyard currently?
So first of all, thank you for having me, and it's a great experience for me. And I will try to give you as much information I can, of course, about the current vintage 20. We are facing a fantastic year so far. We have a gorgeous weather. We had rain, and compared to 19, it's a huge difference. We had in 19 we had 5 inches of rain, and we have already this year the same period we have already 15. So it's great for the vineyard for this vintage 20. So we are very happy on this point. We've just ended the flower season, so we are looking especially at the Grenache to make sure that we won't lose too much. Like we say in French, la coulure can be a catastrophe. So we will see. This is a very strategic moment in the vineyard. So yes, so far 20 looks very, very, very nice. About the previous one, 19, I always say that 19 was a vintage of record, something that we've never seen before. We beat record of heat, record of dry weather, record of wind. And it has made some very concentrated berries on the vines. And I think it made 19 a very special vintage.
In a challenging or a more special way?
Both, actually. Special because we had some very thick skin, and so some very rich juice afterwards. When we pressed, especially when we made the rosé, when we pressed, the skin was very thick, and it has given to the juice, I think, a lot of aroma, more than previous years, I think. Of course, it's always difficult, when you're a winemaker to remain clear and not to be too much a salesman. I try to remain a producer and winemaker. But I have to say that 19 was very, very special on this point. But it also has been very challenging because, when you have no cloud, no rain for 5-6 months, you're always afraid to lose your crop or to have some cooked aroma. And hopefully this did not happen because we had water in the soil, and it has made a huge difference.
Perfect. And then how did Campuget just come about? I mean, you took over the estate, or your family did, over 60 years ago, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. My grandfather came in Campuget first time at the end of 1941. It has been, you can see, especially today with all these hairs, that I don't have the classic Mediterranean colors. The family is from the northern part of France. And my grandfather was living in a small village at the border between France and Belgium. He has been injured, and he received one bullet in the eyes during the first battle in 1940. And so the doctor told him, you have to leave the north and to go for the south. And the family was making beer in the north, and my grandfather decided to make wine. So he bought Campuget in 1941. And Campuget was already an established winery. And when he came in Campuget, he found, of course, a vineyard, and he found some tanks and everything to let him do some wine like people used to do in Campuget since, at least, we are sure that there is a vineyard in Campuget since 1753. So there is a very long story between Campuget and the wine.
And our friend Hollis Nelson in San Francisco has a question. She wants you to tell the story of when her grandfather rode his bike up to Chateau and got the clippings of the Grenache and brought them back.
Yeah, it's a funny story that I don't know if you have to be proud or not, but yes, can you imagine the situation? You're in the middle of the Second World War. You have been injured a few years before, and you want to plant a vineyard, and you can't find any roots or anything to do it. and he heard about that there was a possibility to get some in Chateauneuf. So he had no cars, no horses at this time because Campuget was occupied and the Germans took everything. So he just found his bicycle and he went to Chateauneuf and took some roots and vines, and he decided to plant some at Campuget. So that was an, you know, it's always something very funny when we say that in the family, that granddaddy took his bicycle during the war just to plant a vineyard. You know, it's weird.
Are those still?
It was Grenache.
Are those still planted in the vineyard today?
No, we had to pull them out like 10 years ago. We had a bad disease on the. We had sort of a serious vine deformation, and so it was not possible to conduct the vineyard properly. So we had to pull them out, and currently we pulled them out in 2011, and we will replant them maybe in 2 or 3 years, because we never replant before 10 years in Campuget at the same place.
Okay. And going back to the war, what's the story with the freedom tree on the property?
It's another story, but you know, it's when you live in an old estate like this, of course, there is a lot of history behind the scene. And this tree that we call I should name it actually the memorial tree, because you celebrated it a few days ago in the US, but this tree is also a memorial for us, very important, not to forget that during the Second World War, my grandfather was working in Campuget. There is a little path here, and suddenly he heard a plane, and it was an American plane, and the American plane, who might have been informed by intelligence that we were occupied, shooted at my grandfather because they thought that he was German. And he had just a second to hide himself behind the tree, and he heard the bullet in the trunk of the tree, and he has been saved by the tree. And he always told us to never forget that some young American came in 1944 and to help us to kick off the Germans from the property. And so that's why we call it the freedom tree.
Pretty awesome story. And your name has a bit of American heritage built into it, yeah?
Yes, that's true also. It's true. Yeah, my father is a deep and great lover of American history. But you know, one of my sisters used to live in Philadelphia, and when he went there, he visited Gettysburg, and all the Civil War history is something very important for him. And before I was born, he had two daughters, and he decided one day, saying to my mother, if we have a boy, I would like to name him Franck-Lin, because Benjamin Franklin is maybe the most important political and historic man in the U.S. History.
Love it.
And that's why it's Franklin.
What's that?
And that's why I'm named Franck-Lin.
Love it. We've got a question from George Morgado from Winebow, and he wants to know kind of about sense of place with the vineyard. You're so close to the Mediterranean, like what, 40-minute drive or so forth, and it's kind of sandwiched between Southwest Rhone, Languedoc. How is it infected by the Mistral? How does this translate to the wines, etc.?
You know, we are, like you just said, we are right in the middle of a triangle between Provence, Languedoc, and Rhône. We have this strange place where we have deep influences from Languedoc, Rhône, and Provence, of course. And we have, of course, some Mistral. Mistral is the identity of the Rhône Valley in terms of climate. I can't say that we are affected, but we are in affection with the Mistral. We love Mistral. Mistral is something that, let's take the current example. We have been under a strong Mistral for the last 3 weeks. So when you have Mistral, you don't have to spray, because it takes all the humidity, all the clouds out of the country, and we have no mildew, no disease. So out of the fact that the Mistral can affect myself during the winter when it's very cold and horrible, for the vineyard, it's a great thing. We truly love the Mistral.
And what about the soil composition?
So the soil is, you know, we have the classic soil you can find along the Rhone Valley. We truly have the same soil that you have in Châteauneuf, that you have in some other appellation along the Rhone River. It's because the soil in the Costières de Nîmes and in Campuget comes from the river, the Rhone River. It used to be, you know, the big block of ice in the French Alps. The Rhone River was just, the icy period was just a big icy piece. And it has been, during centuries and centuries and centuries, the ice has rolled the soil and created some pebbles that we have in our soil. And these pebbles are fantastic because even they are not, when you see this soil, you don't think that you can plant a vineyard in it because it looks like too rocky. But in fact, it's great. It's a great soil because roots can go very deep and find some water. And that's very important because after this thick layer of pebbles, you have clay and water. And back to, for example, vintage 19, where we had a drought for 6 months, roots were able to find some freshness in the soil because of the clay and the water. So this is classic Rhone soil, a lot of galets, like we say in French, and they are great to grow a vineyard.
Perfect. And talk about the different varietals on the estate.
So that's, we have, you know, we have some classic Rhone varietals because again, we are in the Rhone, you know, it's, sometimes you will see Campuget if you look at the wine guide, you will see it in Languedoc. Sometimes if you look at a touristic guide, you will see it in Provence. But again, we are talking about wine, and soil is from the Rhone, climate is under the Rhone influence, and varietal also from the Rhone. We have in Campuget a lot of Syrah, we have a lot of Grenache, we have a lot of, we have a tiny touch of Carignan, but we have a lot of Vermentino, Roussanne. So again, very, very classic Rhone varietal, planted since very long. We have a big proportion of Syrah in terms of red, because my father realized that it was, the expression of Syrah was better in the Campuget soil rather than the Grenache. Especially the Grenache sometimes as during the maturity has a too high level of alcohol when it's planted in Campuget. We don't know why, but this is what happens. So we have planted a lot of Syrah. We have like, you know, the vineyard is 320 acres, and we have like 120 acres of Syrah.
And then how are the vines planted? I mean, is it similar to Chateau de Campuget where you have the gobelet or the bush system, or is it all trellised? Is it?
It's all trellises. It's all trellises. It's a choice, you know, it's a choice we made a long time ago. And to be honest with you, I think it's a choice that today we were happy we made it, because we have today a big problem is to find men and women who accept to work in the vineyard for like 9 hours. You know, for example, currently this is the period where we have to take care of the trellises. You know, you have to take the trellises back to the leaves level, and it's hard. It takes like 10 hours a day. The heat, currently the temperature outside is about almost 90. So it's not easy. Yeah, but it's more difficult when you have gobelet. So we decided to make this choice of trellises, and we manage the trellises in a better way rather than the gobelet here, especially in terms of human management.
We have a question from Sean Bouchy. With global warming, are you looking at other varietals?
That's a great
the vineyard.
That's a great question. That's a great question because I can't tell that we have been already hit by the global warming. I don't know, but what I know is that the Mediterranean Sea, which is, like you mentioned earlier, is very close from us. The level of the sea is higher and higher every year, and it means that the weather and the climate will change. Of course, I don't know if it will be in 5, 10, 20, 100 years, but it will change for sure. And so we started 10 years ago at Campuget to think about it and to try to find some solution. And one of the idea was to select and taste wines from all over the world, especially from area where the weather and the climate is different from Campuget. And so we planted different varietal just to try. And one of the big experience we started to do is the Saperavi that we planted now 7 years ago, coming from Georgia in the Caucasian area. And it's a great experience. You know, climate over there can be fully different from what we have in Campuget. It can be very cold, it can be very dry, it can be very humid. And that's very, very, very interesting to grow a different varietal. And as a new challenge next year, we planted last year some Albarino to experiment, to see how it grows here. And next year we're going to plant some Assyrtiko, which is famous to be resistant to drought, and we will see how it will be what would be his expression in Campuget in the future. That would be very interesting.
Very fun. Going back to the Saperavi, when that wine is in most markets now in the United States, and when people taste it, what should they expect out of it? I mean, it's probably a varietal most people have never experienced.
You know, I think it's for me, it's the varietal of the future, because the vines are very resistant to drought. They are very resistant to humid weather and to a bad rain. The average yield is good. It's not too low, not too high. It's easy to drive and to contact the vineyard in a nice way. And the expression in the glass after the whole process of winemaking is very, very nice. So what expect when you have this Saperavi in your glass is surprise. I mean, you have to taste it. I don't want to talk too much about what you can expect, because myself, the first time I tasted Saperavi, I was blown away. I mean, I was surprised. I was telling myself, but why I haven't tasted it before? It's something I've never seen before. So I won't tell you too much. I won't tell you what I feel about this wine. I would just recommend you to try it and let me know what you think about it, because it's very surprising.
Very fun. To change gears a little bit, we've got another question from the Prestige team in Maryland regarding your rosés.
Yeah.
You've become so famous for all across the country and the world. You use typically a higher proportion of Syrah opposed to Grenache in some of the blends, but you always get this buoyant, ethereal lightness, freshness, almost cloud-like character out of the wine. And we wonder, how do you do
it? You know, don't tell it to everybody, but we do nothing. It's nature. It's just nature. No, seriously, you know, the key is the maturity control first. Is the maturity control. Is the fact that I think we picked, we try to pick at the very right time the grapes. That's the most important. If you bring some Syrah too matured, then you will have a very thick color. The whole process, honestly, starts not in August when you do the maturity control, but during the pruning season. When we prune part of the vineyard to make rosé, we don't prune it as we do for the red, where it's much more severe. We are lighter on pruning for the rosé, and it gives, of course, something with less concentration at the end, because you have a bit more cluster. And that's maybe the big difference. We do at Campuget rosé not to have a more concentrated red, but because we like rosé, and because we consider that the rosé can be a very serious wine, and so it requests something very special during the pruning, and something very, very special with the maturity control, to make sure that we are not we won't pick too late the grapes. That's very, very important. So yeah, pruning and maturity control.
Perfect. And then Mark Kalashnik, our other friend in Indianapolis, wants to know, during the fermentation process, is there a point, or in the pressing, shall I say, when you know you've got the right color to pull away and kind of move forward?
So I will be very honest with Mark. If there is a secret at this point, I won't tell it. But there is no secret, Mark. No, the truth is that it's really, again, it's really doing the maturity control, and it brings, if we're able to bring the varietal with the right color at the winery, then the job is done. If we don't, then we missed the whole rosé process, because of course the color for the rosé, what we try to have is just, you know, I have a bottle here, is just to have a bottle that says drink me, just because by the color, and it comes really from, again, it comes from the vineyard and from the maturity control. There is, if you press, maybe the only thing is that we are very light on press, to make sure that we don't make too much extraction of tannins and color. That's maybe the only secret, but I think it's not a secret. I think it's the same all over the world. But what we do in the vineyard is more special, and I think it's definitely the key.
Can you just held up the 1753, which made me think, can you kind of tell the difference between the tradition line and the 1753 line?
Yeah, of course. Tradition line is a representation of the appellation. When you drink a tradition rosé Campuget, a tradition red, or a tradition white, you know, you will drink some blends that my father made in Campuget like 40 years ago, with a very simple idea. I want to see people drinking wine every day and not only on Sunday. And for him, this is truly what the appellation should be, a wine that people can enjoy every day. And so the wine on the tradition line are blends. So Syrah, the rosé is a Syrah Grenache blend. The white is a Roussanne, Marsanne, Grenache Viognier. The red is a Syrah Grenache, an oaked. So you see, easy wine for every day, and a great value for price. That's what we want to do with the tradition line. With 1753, when we created this line, I wanted to show that we have a special know-how in Campuget. And we wanted to identify some varietal that express very, very well on our terroir, and to keep the identity of the terroir and the varietal together into the bottle, and to make a special work on it. So we selected varietals, like, of course, we have the Saperavi, we have the Rosé Syrah Vermentino. So back to the Rosé, the Syrah Vermentino is totally different from what you have when you open a bottle of tradition. Not to say that it's better or bad, but they are different. The 1753, the Syrah Vermentino, is truly the blend of Provence and Rhône together, with a lot of rich aroma. That you have less fruitiness in the 1753 that you can get in the tradition, of course, but you have more complexity and more richness in the 1753. And we have, of course, also varietal. We have the Syrah, we have the Grenache. What we launched recently a Roussanne, a pure Roussanne, non-sulfites, and that's, I don't know if it's the future, but this is for us a way to work in a better way and to improve the quality. And what we do, the work we do on 1753, will help us to increase the quality of tradition in the future.
And with the no sulfites for some of the wines now, I mean, you have Syrah and Saperavi, etc. What's the vision moving forward with that line, and your thoughts for it?
My vision is that as a winemaker and as a vine grower, I try to reduce any input in the wine and in the vineyard. Sulfites is something important. because it can protect the wine. So what we try to do back to 5 years ago now is to find a process helping us not to use any sulfites in certain wines. And the idea is to multiply this in the future, if it is possible, if the wine can do it, because not all the wine can do. But for the rosé, I think it's too dangerous. There's not enough tannins. It's very fragile, and I would be afraid to do that on the rosé. Maybe we will try, but so far we are not matured to do that. So it's a work that requires patience, and we have to do it step by step. For me, it must be the future, because when I taste wines without sulfites today, they truly reveal the purity of the varietal, and I really like it.
Love it. Personally, I find your wines to be some of the most food-friendly, delicious, drinkable wines I've ever had. And when we were together last, you were talking about how there's so many Michelin star restaurants that have Campuget on the wine list. What is it about the sommeliers and the chefs that gravitate towards your wine so much?
You know, I'm not a sommelier. I'm not a chef. But I think if these places select some of our wines, it's really because of the quality. I think the wine is the wine respect the expression of the terroir. The wine express our identity in Campuget, maybe our family identity, and this is maybe what they like. It's not it's not something industrial. It's not something that they will see everywhere. But when, for example, when a chef in Paris or where else in the world decide to buy a bottle of the Sapé Ravi, I think it's a sort of I think the chef must be creative in his kitchen, and I think the wine is very creative too. It's not every day that you have a chance to taste a Sapé Ravi non-sulfite with a glass stopper, and maybe it was risky to do that, but they like it, they appreciate it. But yeah, I think the reason why they select it, for me, there is only one answer: is quality.
Love it. Well, Franck-Lin, thank you so much for taking the time today to kind of go through these questions and to tell us all about your history and where the winery is located, the wines, the future, the different labels and so forth. So hopefully soon we get together, whether in the Northwest or in France.
Of course, Grant. We will. Cheers. And we will talk real soon, okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Grant. Take care.
Cheers. You too.